Whoops. I accidentally forgot to clear the storage from my deleted videos. But the whole thing about it is that when you include the equity evaluation, right? Because I talk about this in terms of business, and the whole thing is that I don't make the rules, right? I mean, it just is what it is. When it comes to a business, when you have a business that produces a profit, that profit, the multiple of that profit is effectively what how you gauge the equity evaluation of a business. And when you take a look at my business, I'm the guy running my business, and I effectively do everything by myself. My business is massively profitable. I'm actually in a situation where I am compounding growth of my business by about 25 to 33% a month. Okay, it might even be more. I'm actually compounding growth my business, and when I include the fact that I will restart using leverage here pretty soon, then the amount of business, that the amount of money that the amount of growth that my business achieves will go parabolic. Okay, and I've already talked about this, the whole idea of the point of inflection. And when you take a look at my business, and it just is what it is, and it's like I've legitimately increased the revenue, the net profits of my business by like 1,000% over the last 2.5 years. I genuinely did it, right? It's not an opinion. Money is not an opinion. Money is very simple, right? I took my business from making $50,000 a year to making $500,000 a year, and I'm actually still on the up and up, right? Still on the up and up. I have a very reasonable idea for how I will do it, etc., etc. And so my business is on the up and up, and it's producing a massive profit. I probably have a good growth multiple, and I'm also a cattleman, right? I effectively trade commodities. It's a very equitable market. It's very, it's a very good business. It's a very stable business. It's effectively stabilized by the beef consumer, right? And so, it's a massive market. I'm very equitable. My profits have been increasing substantially every month. Well, not every month. My profits have been increasing every year since the conception of my business, and I'm still on the up and up. All right, so when you include everything, the sheer equity evaluation of my business is probably a lot. Because you also need to understand that when I put it all together, like the equity evaluation of my herd and the amount of money that I make, I am legitimately making like $500,000 a year. All right, and so, I take a look at it, and I mean, it just is what it is. All right, and I take a look at that, and I say, well, it just is what it is. I don't make the rules. I just play the game, right? And when I multiply my profits and I give it a good number, I mean, it's a lot, okay? And so when you actually think about it, and I've been saying, the whole thing about it is that it just is what it is, and at the end of the day, I can effectively start these farms whenever I feel like it, right? Like I feel like starting myself another farm, so I'm going to do it here within the next few months, all right? It's not some it's not some Disneyland adventure. I have a clear set of idea for how I will do it, and the big idea. I guess you can hold me to my word, or what, or don't. Die poor, have fun. All right, I've already decided that this is what I will do. I have decided to increase the size of my business. That's one of the things that I'm working on right now in terms of systematically improving the things that I'm doing. One of the things that I'm doing right now is increasing the size of my business. All right, I'm looking to increase, but I'm looking to increase the size of my business. All right. But I mean, the equity evaluation of my business is going to be good. All right. I make a lot of money. I'm already profitable. I'm already massively profitable, and I effectively trade commodities. All right. That's a very good business, very stable business, long future, right? For as long as people eat beef, I will be in business. All right. I've already talked about the barrier of entry to farming is the skill set. Learning how to farm is so difficult that effectively nobody makes it effectively. All right, effectively nobody makes it. All right. And and as of today, the whole thing about, because, and I've talked about this in terms of like a broader idea, but let's say that you go into farming and you only want to learn how to, grow the crop, and you only want to learn how to run the cattle, or let's say that you're even in a situation where you only want to learn how to, grow the crop and run the cattle, but you don't really have, you don't really have, the desire to learn how to run the business. Well, then you won't make any money. If you learn how to run cattle and you learn how to run a business, but you can't grow, you can't grow a good crop, you cannot grow any grass, well, then you won't make any money. All right. If because, I mean, that's just how it pans out. Okay. Don't come after me about it. And I've already talked about this. The whole reason why it's so important to learn how to grow grass, run cattle, and run a business and do all three things very well is because, number one, when you have grass, you don't need any equipment to harvest it. You just put your animals on it when the grass is ready to be harvested. All right, there's a lot of things that you can look for when you're looking to harvest your grass to make sure that the feed values are going to be good. All right, make sure it's properly fertilized and in the proper stage of development, and depending on what type of grass you're growing, et cetera, right? Et cetera, et cetera. When you're running cattle, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the commodity markets do. Okay, if you're sitting there deathly terrified of, oh my God, what's gonna happen if and I've already talked about the potential of a double whammy. It will ultimately happen at some point. It always does. There will always be a time at some point when the price of cattle go down and the price of corn goes up at the same time, and corn is effectively a baseline for cattle feed. But but if you're in a situation where you're sitting there and you're going, oh well, the cattle market's gonna probably go down, you're wasting your time. Spend your time learning how to grow grass, all right? Because when you have grass, growing grass is so cheap and it puts so much weight on your animal that the commodity markets will not matter. All right, if the commodity markets fell to $2 tomorrow, I would go tap dancing to the sale barn. I wouldn't even be worried. My cattle are so far in the positive that it doesn't even matter. Legitimately, I've had my cattle on grass, and I even still have 15 cattle on grass. I've legitimately had my cattle on grass for like the last 8 months, and I made a massive amount of money on all of my animals. Except for the 15 animals that I got out there right now. Those animals still need to be stabilized, right? If the sale barn, if the feeder cattle market, if the cattle market legitimately fell 33% tomorrow, I wouldn't even be concerned. Legitimately, I would not. I would go tap dancing to the sale barn, okay? I would go skipping to the sale barn. I would be so happy. I wouldn't know, I wouldn't I would be ecstatic. Everything is on sale, right? I can buy more cattle for cheap. It wouldn't matter to me if the price of cattle falls. Why? Because I grow grass. I effectively grow grass so well that, I'm effectively one of the best grass growers on the entire planet. And, I also do very well in business. And in terms of business, if I legitimately only had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years with no problem. That's what I'm talking about when I say business. All right, that's a very realistic way to look at this. And another way to look at this is, as of today, on my 50 acres, I just about make a $500,000 a year, something like that. All right. So it is what it is. All right, it just is what it is. You know, I can start these businesses whenever, and so but that's and if you legitimately just absolutely hate my guts and whatever, and you don't want to believe me, then go off and have fun, okay? I don't trust me. I don't care. All right. If you died tomorrow, it wouldn't matter to me. I'm not a malicious person. I'm not selling my soul to the devil. If anything, I'm looking to give you the best information that I can. All right, if you learn how to grow a crop and you learn how to run cattle, and you don't learn how to run a business, then guess what? You won't make any money. If you learn how to run cattle and you learn how to run a business, but you don't learn how to grow, grow grass in particular, because if you grow something like corn, and I understand that there are areas where you could get 200 bushels an acre and things like that, but the thing about growing corn is that when you harvest that corn, it just takes so much equipment to harvest that corn, and then you got to put it in a bin and whatever, and then you got to mix it to feed your animals. When you have grass, you effectively just when you have determined that the grass has proper feed values, you just put your animals out on the grass and they will eat it. All right. When they eat it, they will legitimately put on like over 3 pounds a day if you're doing it right. And when the grass grows a little bit too much, you can just supplement them with a little bit of distiller grains. Right? If the grass, grows a little bit too much after that, you can supplement them with a little bit of corn and distiller grains. All right. And they'll still put on like over 2.5, borderline 3 pounds a day, probably. Especially if you have something like an annual forage, like a winter wheat, because an annual forage will have higher feed values than a perennial forage. All right. On average, they will. And so, but that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.